Hello, hello, as LaFosse here. My name might start with an A and end in an A, but I doubt I'm quite as musically talented as the main subject of the video. If you haven't heard of him before, let me introduce the opulent octatonic operatic puppeteer from the bounty hunter unit Armis, HOLOSTARS-English's Octavio. Debuting alongside his other genmates in November of 2023, Octavio is the most musically inclined of the Armis members. His own debut featured a cover release of Hollow Hunger, as well as orchestrating and singing his own opening theme song for his streams. It was only a matter of time before he released his own original song, which was featured in his 3D debut under the same title, String Theology. It's as theatrical and well put together as the Octoposse, Octavio's fans, have come to expect from their Oshi, not to mention that the 3D debut's cinematography and staging, which makes the song 10 times more amazing. Here's a disclaimer. If you have not listened to String Theology, please do so before watching this video. I mean it. I highly recommend seeing it in Tabi's 3D debut stream, which is pure cinema that cannot be missed. Seriously, I'll wait. And now that y'all are definitely caught up, it's about time I set the stage for the lyric breakdown. First, let's give credit where credit is due. The vocals were of course by Octavio, with lyrics by Remre and jointly composed by Dasu and Eishiyuki. The three aforementioned collaborators also are responsible for some of the writing. On the music video side of things, illustrations were done by Hikina7, and the video's visuals by Vermilion AMVs. Let's all give these artists the claps they deserve. They all cooked with this Ori song. Before I dive into the lyrics, here are a couple things I'd like to address. Firstly, as beautiful and amazing as the music video for String Theology is, the main focus of my breakdown will be on the actual song itself. There's plenty to discuss with the lyrics as is, and I'd rather not bore you with all of my ranting. Secondly, when discussing Octavio's lore and what the song's verses might reveal about said lore, I'm not including any information that's been discussed within membership streams. For one thing, I'm not a member. Hey, it's hard out here in the swamp, okay? But more importantly, I'd like to respect the membership Poppets and Octavio's discretion for any lore info that's not free to the public. So if my speculation and lore theories turn out to be very off base, you know why. Jumping into the song itself, it opens with cryptic verses. An outside voice, later clarified to be a group of voices, states that they are trapped in a void. We are empty and numbed. Embraced by chaos, we are abandoned and lost. These opening lines being sung by an unknown group reminds me of the concept of the chorus in ancient Greek theater. Within plays and epic poems, the chorus acts as the omniscient observer, commenting on the narrative or providing context to the story's plot. Based on the wording of the lyrics, I believe that in this case, the chorus represents the souls of the Poppets, Octavio's fan mascot. In the Puppeteer's stream, when the mascot was first revealed, Octavio said that a Poppet was held together by the strings that bind, which gives life to souls desperate to live. With this in mind, the chorus describes their time before gaining their form, apparently feeling trapped in a void. The sentiment of being abandoned and lost, first introduced here, will reappear in later verses to emphasize the theme of string theology. It's too early to reveal the theme, however, so you'll just have to stick around to the end of the video. Anyways, in the song's following stanza, the maestro himself finally makes himself known. He exclaims that the strings they sing in harmony, a life bestowed anew. Here, the strings being spoken of are likely connected with Octavio's own strings, which helped give life to the Poppets. I have a feeling, however, that these verses aren't just about the Octoposse alone. The fact that the words specify that it's a life that's being reborn, not many lives, leads me to theorize that there's someone specific this is focused on. But let's put a pin in that for now. The puppeteer sings further, switching to a second-person perspective when describing the story of someone at the gaping mouth of despair. He emphasizes the fact that you have no recollection, nor aspirations, and no repair. This fits well with the lore of the Poppets. Their souls despaired at their deaths, and upon having their form, can no longer remember their former lives. This is further strengthened by the next verse, which states that you are reborn as a hollow shell with a heart full of scars. Can't even ask yourself what tragedies colluded to leave you marred. I think it's interesting that another Greek theater staple, the idea of a tragedy, is incorporated into the verse. A Greek tragedy, according to the online Collins Dictionary, is defined as having a protagonist fall to disaster through a combination of personal failing and circumstances. The idea of tragedies as arbiters of fate is highlighted by word choices such as colluded, usually applied to people secretly conspiring with each other. Tragedy, then, almost becomes a supernatural force, a godlike entity that chooses who it mars in its fury. Fate and destiny are a motif that will heavily appear in string theology, a concept that the ancient Greeks themselves often delved into in relation to their pantheon. Okay, I'll try not to yap too much about the classics. This is a lyric breakdown after all. The song's next stanza continues to speak to the unspecified you, saying there's nowhere to go, the darkness is all you'll ever know, but there's a glow, a hand that can pull you from the flow. It's here that string theology's somber tone begins to shift. While at first still in the darkness described in the early stanzas, the lyrics then reveal the glow, the proverbial light at the end of the tunnel. As darkness has so far been characterized as being a place of despair and confusion, the light therefore should obviously represent hope and clarity. That this glow is emanating from a hand, offering to help you out of the flow, presumably the void itself, makes me theorize that the verses represent Octavio's own words to the Poppets. After all, if he's the one who brought the Poppet's soul back into their current forms, couldn't that be seen as the puppeteer saving them? The latter half of the stanza seems to confirm this, as Octavio exclaims, "Hark, let him know your name. Let the maestro make an anthem of your flame." It's safe to say that the identity of him and maestro is Octavio. Figuratively, Tavi making an anthem of your flame is referring to how he recovers souls from being snuffed out into oblivion. As anthems are supposed to be cheery, uplifting songs for specific causes or groups, the last line of the verse emphasizes how the puppeteer's actions change the trajectory of the Octoposse's fate. Now the song reaches its first actual chorus stanzas. We, the listeners, are told to hear the melodies of a future written in the stars. His revelation plays, the puppets dance away. Again, the lyrics go back to the idea of fate and fortune as real constructs, at least within Elysium. It implies that somehow Octavio is able to hear the melodies described, or at the very least is aware of them existing. From his revelation plays, I'm thinking that it's Octavio being referred to, and that this revelation likely relates to the future the puppeteer speaks of, something which has helped to unite him and the Octoposse together. Then, Octavio demands listeners to hear the echo and listen to the only truth. The strings of fate will pull you through. Okay, I know I said I'd stop talking about the ancient Greeks, but this is too good to pass up. So in Greek mythology, there are 3 crones, known as the Fates. Their tasks were related to maintaining order and were able to see into all aspects of time, the past, the present, and the future. The Fates were also responsible for making sure mortals died at their fated time, cutting the string that represented a mortal's life when the time came. While I'm reluctant to believe that these same Fates inhabit Octavio's own lore, I'm willing to bet that the origin of his powers relates to a similar deity or omnipresence, the strings that he so reverently speaks of in the chorus. Alright, it's about time we take a breather. Stretch your legs, crack those knuckles, and let me indulge in an intermission channel plug. If you're enjoying my breakdown so far, I highly encourage y'all to check out my other videos. I have 2 other breakdowns of Ori songs, plus a variety of other videos. Whether it's imagining VTubers as Pokemon trainers, analyzing dating sim archetypes, or my series of shorts on VTubing culture, there's no shortage of topics I like to delve into. If that sounds like your cup of tea, consider subscribing to my channel. Okay, break time's over. Let's head back into string theology. Breaking out from the more serious pop tone, the song transitions to a rap section of verses. It's here that the lore theorizing ramps up as the lyrics shift to a third-person point of view, telling the story of a man. Assuming that the man in question is Octavio, the next few lines provide nuggets of insight into his previously unknown backstory. Tabi states that the man has his nose deep diving where the blight descends. Blight, as defined by Merriam-Webster, is first defined as a disease or injury by plants, but can also be used more broadly to mean something that impairs and destroys, and a deteriorated condition. In terms of the first meaning, the specificity of the word leads me to believe that this links to a flower that Octavio introduced into his lore. As revealed in the debut of his second outfit, the quietest flower grows in the alternate setting of Anathema, a seemingly separate world from Elysium, the prominent setting of the HOLOSTARS-EN universe. While there's so far no extensive details relating to Anathema, I've speculated that the blight described in the Aura song connects to this new setting. Furthermore, the secondary definitions of blight as something which destroys or deteriorates very much resembles the concept of corruption, a real threat faced by the denizens of Elysium. Could this corrupting force be something more menacing? A threat which affects not just Elysium, but the broader universe of HOLOSTARS-EN? But I won't get ahead of myself here. We've got time to discuss those delicious lore theories towards the end of the breakdown. Anywho, the next line of the rap describes the man being called crazy, whimsical, defiant. What a waste. I'm interpreting this to mean that wherever Octavio was before Armus, his investigation into the aforementioned blight had led to those around him to think he was wasting his time. Whether that's because the blight itself is seen as a superfluous issue, or perhaps that the scale of the problem is so immense that people have given up trying to solve it, it's hard to say. That same song verse later states that it goes one ear out the other. Peace, see you next time. It's uncertain whether these lines are spoken by the same voice, the voice of disapproval for Tabi's interests, or if they are 2 distinct voices, where it's Octavio who's cutting short the conversation with the send-off. I think it could go either way, but let me know in the comments what you think. The rap then switches to another scene, describing more of the man's life story. Starting as a patron, he was learning stories from the stage, and the aimless soul gained a blazing heart, yet the actor retired. Taken literally, these verses chronicle the journey of some sort of stage performer, presumably related to music or puppeteering, and later gave up despite the blazing heart of determination they had developed. But considering how much string theology's lyrics have relied on subtext and figurative language, I personally very much doubt that these verses are just literal. For instance, who's to say that learning from the stage is actually referring to performance? Is it possible that this verse is somehow related to the blight that the actor was investigating? With that in mind, the song returns to its previous tempo, slowing down into the verse, "Last bow, but the show must go on." Even though the actor had retired, for whatever reason, he's tasked to keep the show going. Then the lyrics go into explaining that the song of the strings are never gone. If, like mentioned earlier in the video, the strings are connected with the concept of fate, this can be interpreted as destiny steering the actor, presumably Octavio, to keep going on whatever the show represents. It can also be meant to call back to the melodies of the future of the chorus verses. In other words, the hope of the future is still there, even if the speaker isn't able to hear them. Then, in the next few lines, Octavio seems to provide insight into his own motivations. What more fitting hearts are deserving of a second act than the broken, the lost and abandoned, the beaten full of fury he brings dawn to be? Think the hearts being discussed in these verses are representative of the Octoposse, at least within Octavio's lore. The descriptors of broken, lost, abandoned, and beaten accurately line up with the backstory of the Poppet from Tavi's mascot reveal stream. Originally wayward souls, it's the puppeteer's decision to give them a new form that's alluded to by the second act. Like the next act of a stage performance, the Poppets are given a second chance at life. The line, "He brings dawn to thee," directly refers to Octavio's gift of rebirth for the Octoposse, as dawn describes the start of a new day. It's here that the voices of the chorus returns. They explain that in this melodic strife, the soul searches for a home chord. In songs, the secret of life. In strings, the truth of the world. The melodic strife seems to describe the struggle of the Poppets to retain their humanity when their souls were still wrought with corruption. As for what the home chord is supposed to represent, let's refer to the dictionary definition of a chord. Within music, chords are groups of notes that are played together. I believe that here the chord is supposed to symbolize community. Within the strife faced by the Octoposse before meeting Octavio, they were searching for help, or at the very least companionship from others like them. The secret of life, stated in the song, is, once again, a reference to the puppeteer's revival of the Poppets, but can also be linked with the idea of music as a force of healing. It's through the strings that Octavio was able to forge bonds with the Octoposse, and from that connection, they can work together to find the truth of the world, perhaps related to the meaning or purpose of their own lives. Octavio then returns to singing, listing 4 different music styles: allegro, legato, staccato, più forte. Now, if there are any musicians or music theorists in the audience, please bear with me as I describe what's likely fairly basic terms. First, let's start with allegro. In music composition, allegro describes an upbeat, quickly paced tempo within a song. The next term, legato, is used to illustrate when parts of a composition should be played smoothly from one note to the next, with no gaps in between. Afterwards is staccato, a foil to legato in the sense that the music notes are played sharp and distinct from one another. Lastly comes più forte, which indicates when a song should be at its loudest. While it's likely that these music terms aren't as lyrically significant as the rest of string theology, I do think it's interesting that they create a sort of bridge into the last phase of the song. If anyone more musically inclined has better input into this section of the Ori song, I'd love hearing more about it from y'all. Before entering the second refrain of the choral verses, Tavi says, "Hark my words. The maestro plays the orchestra of reality in a cosmic symphony." If we recall the mentions of strings of fate that's repeated throughout the song, then the fact that the maestro is able to play the orchestra could confirm that Octavio's endowed with similar abilities. Even more interesting is the cosmic symphony, as that also connects to the theories surrounding the puppeteer's origins. Assuming that Anathema is a remnant of the world Octavio previously inhabited, then it begs the question of how Tavi was able to get to Elysium in the first place. The following choral stanzas continue as normal, with no changes to the lyrics until the last line, providing additional verbs to what the strings of fate are able to do. While sings and guides are familiar verbs associated with these strings of fate, it binds further expands on the power this omnipresent force can wield. Just as Octavio bound his fans to a contract in his debut stream, is it possible that the strings of fate have bound Octavio in a similar way? Perhaps the contract is related to Elysium, and our puppeteer has a yet untold goal that he's trying to fulfill, according to the will of destiny. With that said, we finally enter into the final stanzas of String Theology. After describing the capabilities of the strings of fate, Octavio exclaims the following: "Tell me, is this my sentence? Don't leave." The perspective changes to first person as Octavio directly confronts destiny about his current lot in life. The sentence Octavio speaks of infers to the idea of a prison sentence, a specific punishment that's placed upon a person after being judged as guilty for a crime. This reveals, at the very least, that the maestro believes he's being punished by fate, though in what manner is still hard to decipher. Whether Octavio committed an actual sin, or if it's more of a morally gray set of circumstances, Tavi seems to think that he needs to find retribution for the errors of his forgotten past. Despite the authority that fate has over Octavio, and seemingly the rest of the EN verse, he still pleads for them to not leave. This ties back nicely to the loneliness described earlier in the song, indicating that perhaps it wasn't just the Poppets who were in need of community. It's at the very end of the song that the chorus returns for the last time. They state that the strings, they sing. If you hear them, listen. The chorus's encouragement of the audience to listen to fate may be a roundabout way of delivering the final message of the song. Now that we've gone over the lyrics, let's put together the meaning of string theology. Let's start with the song's title. Theology is defined by Merriam-Webster as the study of a religious faith, practice, and experience. With the level of reverence that the strings of fate are given throughout the lyrics, as well as the depiction of power they hold over others, I'd say theology is an accurate way to label the song. String theology, then, is a statement of purpose for Octavio as a character. What is that purpose, you may ask? To recover the lost and abandoned souls, guiding them to a brighter future, and perhaps convert them into Poppets along the way. Octavio, as presented in the song, chooses to keep believing in the path he's treading, even while he deals with his own self-doubt. Despite questions about his past and anguish about the ambiguousness of his life's purpose, the puppeteer continues to move forward. As well as a song about hope, I'd say that string theology is a call to action, to reach out to others and seek solace through our bonds. It's through these connections that we find our footing and can trudge ahead towards a more hopeful vision of the future. But now that that's out of the way, we can get into the theorizing. Again, the following theories are purely based on the song and the lore provided in Octavio's public live streams. Now, as I mentioned throughout the breakdown, I believe that the chaos established in the song's opening lines, as well as the blight later mentioned in the rap section, are linked to the corruption of Elysium, as depicted in official works about HOLOSTARS-EN's setting. Denizens of the neighboring lands of Xenokuni and the Badlands face an unnatural force which transform most of them into what's called corruption beasts. If we assume that this corruption is the same as what's described in the rap verses, that could mean that corruption is a much broader plague, affecting not just the setting of the HOLOSTARS-EN universe, but alternate realities alongside it. My theory is this. I believe that Octavio originates from a different reality, likely anathema before it fell into its current state of ruin. The man that Tavi sings about in his rap is that reality's version of himself, a person who'd been studying his world's corruption closely. He acted within a group with similar goals or interest, whether that interest is literally music-related, or more so centered around researching corruption. At some point, the man's world became fully corrupted, but before its destruction, either the man or fate itself rescued him from meeting his own doom. He is sent to the reality containing Elysium, but with a newer form than his previous life. That, I think, is what phrases like "a life restored anew" and "the show must go on" are referring to within the song. Furthermore, I think Octavio somehow obtained, or else is borrowing, the powers of fate through his own strings and music. In order to make sense of his new reality, Tavi assumes that the strings of fate saved him for a specific purpose, which he thinks is saving others from corruption. With that goal in mind, his experiments on corruption beasts and the creation of the Octoposse become more than just quirks of Octavio's nature. If that's the case, it makes the remaining mysteries of the puppeteer's backstory all the more interesting, don't you think? With that, we arrive to the end of this breakdown. Were there any parts of the song's lyrics you thought I overlooked, or didn't discuss more in depth? Let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing, if you're so kind. Alright, I'll see you again in the next video. Toodaloo!